But the point is that, like, when it comes to epigenetics, that's the only real thing, that tangible thing that you might be able to get at this stage.
Okay. And you're a very bright, intelligent guy, and you formed this amazing company that can really help people.
Just to be very clear, I don't recommend other people doing this, because the more supplements you take, the more you have to know what the hell's going on.
You're a wealth of information, hard to keep up with, but I really am grateful for you. Welcome to the Power of Your Voice podcast. I'm your host, Mike Murphy. I'm also the author of the book, The Creation Frequency, and founder of Mounds of Hope, a transformational healing retreat center in Medellin, Colombia. Each week in this podcast, we bring you the most amazing guests and powerful content that will inform you how you too can learn to use your own powerful voice to manifest optimal health, wealth, and transformation that you desire and deserve. Welcome, everybody, to the Power of Your Voice podcast. And I'm your host, Mike Murphy, and I'm super grateful that you're here and super excited that you're here and super excited about today's guest. We're going to get into a subject that I know just enough to be dangerous with, and that's DNA and genetics. And I've studied a little bit about epigenetics, so I look forward to having that conversation. You know, as I'm building this healing retreat center down here in Colombia, it's so confusing. I don't know how you feel. You know, what supplements better? Powder, pills, liquid? What about all this new healing protocols? What about DNA? What about this mRNA that we've been hearing all about? What about vaccines? What about this? What is best for our health? You know, I had a very, very sad experience yesterday where I lost one of my closest friends very suddenly, unexpectedly. Even though he's been battling cancer for a long time, he went in to had a very aggressive treatment regimen. And, you know, a week ago, he was strong as a horse. I mean, I'm talking to him on the phone. He's doing great. And yesterday's dead. And I'll tell you, medicine is so confusing to me right now. And what's the right way to go and what's the wrong way? And then we have energy medicine. We have the mind, the placebo. We have the emotions. So there's a lot going on here. And today's guest actually went from brain fog and not a lot of dough to now a really strong entrepreneur creating a really incredible product that I'm looking forward to learning more about today. So I'd like to welcome to the show right now, Joe Cohen. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So glad that you're here. So tell me the broke part and not doing well, and then what happened, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I grew up with a whole host of like autoimmune type issues, like from the age of already 14, 13. You know, just even I think like the first health issue that I had was a little different than normal. I had some Bell's palsy where half of my face got paralyzed.
I had that once, yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I know exactly what it's like.
Well, actually, I know what it's from now.
Oh, tell me.
I know exactly. Oh, yeah. Oh, you want to go
I really want to know.
So actually, okay, number one is from an immunodeficiency, just broadly speaking.
Okay.
Zooming out. In particular, it has to do with niacin deficiency.
Niacin. Okay.
Niacin deficiency. So interesting. And this kind of, niacin deficiency. But again, there's many aspects to the immune system. So I'm not just saying if I just had to pick one thing, I would say niacin. Right. It could also, there's many ways to stimulate. Maybe somebody's deficient in B12. Sometimes B12 could have to do with it. But niacin actually is the most significant thing. And it's one thing that for some reason or another, right, I've been deficient on it my entire life, right? Or deficient in the sense that I didn't have enough.
Gotcha. And
so that was one of the factors that was causing different health issues. And it was interesting because, as time went on, I've been learning a lot about how to improve the immune system. And so it was interesting because there was a time where I would get this pain in that nerve area, the same pain. I was like, this was about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years. And that was if I wasn't sleeping or if I drank too much caffeine, it would just all of a sudden like reactivate a little bit. Not full blown, but it would reactivate. And I was just like, what is going on there? And then over time, I kind of got better and better, and like it went away. But at a certain point, I realized like I realized that I was deficient in this niacin, and it explained quite a lot of things. And then I just happened to find the study where people with Bell's palsy, it was done in like 1960 or something,
Wow.
1955.
Wow.
People took niacin, like almost everybody got better who took niacin. And I realized not like not having enough niacin was one of the significant causes of my immunodeficiency. And I figured that out through testing, a whole bunch of different kinds of testing. I would not have figured it out in normal ways, because if you just like, I was actually doing a lot of megadosing experiments where I would try one supplement at a time and seeing how it worked for me. There were certain things I stayed away from because of the warnings online. And so if you type in niacin, it like, basically makes it sound like you're going to die if you take more than 60
and it gives you a really hot flash
too. It gives you
too.
a flush.
Right.
Yeah, yes, right.
But where do we get that naturally in our diet, niacin, or do we have to take
meat-based foods?
Meat-based
okay. foods.
Were you lacking in that, or just
my system needs more of it?
Okay,
it just needs more of it.
Genetics,
straight up.
Yeah.
And I could go into, if you want to get technical, I can sit here and speak about for a half hour exactly what niacin does and why it's so important.
No, we don't have time for that. So I'm gonna ask you one question, and then I want to get back to what
niacin was. If you take, I don't think, if you're not deficient in niacin, very unlikely you'll get Bell's palsy.
Interesting. So I got to ask you this, okay? When you woke up and half your face didn't work, what was your first thought?
I've been into self-healing for a while. And so my first thought was like, let me try to look up on Google what the hell was going on. And I was 13, so
okay,
23 years ago, 36 now. But there wasn't information. Like, I also didn't know how to search for the information. I didn't know how the body works. So when you really don't know what the hell's going on,
right,
I just wasn't able to figure anything out. I was just like, I was trying. I don't know. It wasn't successful, whatever I was doing. So fast forward, but I had, but as I was getting older, I had like, from the age of 13, I would eat like some kind of food. I'd get tired from it. Then it started to get worse. I started to get like anxiety, OCD, brain fog, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I was trying to eat healthier and healthier and healthier. I was like literally 14, 15 years old, 9th grade, coming to school with a can of sardines and blueberries.
Wow.
This is 23 years ago, almost 22 years ago, when omega-3 fatty acids weren't as popular as they are now. Blueberries, now people are more aware of it. I was like reading some research there that, hey, if you're eating blueberries, you're gonna be healthier. And I was like coming to school with sardines and blueberries, and people like, what the hell are you doing? Like, literally had sardines with like lettuce, and just like eating sardines and lettuce and blueberries. And like, people like, what is going on with you? Like, they were concerned for my welfare.
But you were willing to do this because you were in so much pain if you ate normal food? Or you were just trying to heal yourself as well?
No, I was trying to heal myself. Something was wrong.
Yeah.
I knew it. And my family was into health already. So it was kind of, my grandmother was already into health. I came from that kind of lineage where the idea of preventing disease was very real. Like, you can prevent disease if you do the right thing.
Right.
That's kind of what was inculcated into me. So and the more I go through life, the more I realize that the more true that is.
Yep.
Right. And especially now, we didn't know what we know now 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years, 20. Every year, the information is exponentially increasing and improving in unbelievable ways.
Yes.
And so in any case, I've been on this 23-year journey on how to improve my health. And by the way, I've been eating whole wheat bread since I was 6. And the reason I started eating whole wheat bread from a young age is because when I would eat white bread, I would get constipation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is at the age of like 7 years old, I figured this out, right?
Wow.
And so from a very young age, 6, 7, I came to school, tuna sandwich, whole wheat bread, some romaine lettuce, and some tomatoes, and that was my lunch every day. Like, maybe some jelly, maybe some eggs, whatever. The point is like, I was eating healthy from a young age.
And so how's your health now with this autoimmune? Have you healed all that? Is that all out of your life now?
Yeah, all of it's done. All of it's done.
And what's your diet like
Not
now?
only is it not only is all of it done, so what happens is that as you get better, you start to challenge yourself more in a whole bunch of ways. And so I challenge myself, and then then I might get a certain issue, then I fix it, and I challenge myself more. I might get I fix it. So my health is way better than I ever thought was possible. And when I say challenge it, I mean something like I've never worked out with weights before because I felt like every time I work out with weights, I just get sick, right? That's an example of challenging it. Or my system would be very just delicate. Like I try something and like I have a reaction, and like I just felt very limited. It's like I do this thing, I couldn't fast because I didn't, my system didn't feel like it had enough energy. Like I would just be bonked out if I was fasting. Right? Like
Got it.
I just felt like, how do people fast? Like what are they doing? Like I can't do anything the whole day if I'm fasting. If I don't get 8 hours of sleep, boom, I can't do anything. So I've realized how to be, not only fix the issues, you could fix the issues and then like just do everything perfectly, and how to be very robust. And I figured something out that I can say that nobody else in this world has figured out. So have you heard of Jordan Peterson's all meat diet?
I've heard of Jordan Peterson. I have not heard of the all meat diet.
Him and his daughter are on an all meat diet.
Period. Nothing but meat?
Nothing but meat and salt.
Wow.
And water.
Wow.
Yep. And so a lot of people know about that diet just from him. Well, it turns out that I did that diet 13 years before him, right? Before him and his daughter. And his daughter did the diet because she had even worse issues than me. Like for me, well, I don't know if it's worse, but for me, I had a lot like issues from a young age, but most of them weren't like diagnosable conditions because I was eating blueberries and like, I was being very healthy, eating sardines. So I feel like I would have definitely gotten IBD and, a whole bunch of diagnosed conditions that I didn't end up getting, or I delayed it. So it's kind of in like this pre-disease state for a while. But his daughter got like juvenile arthritis from the age of 7, which is like one of the earliest cases in Canada for juvenile arthritis. One of like 7 people. I don't know exactly the numbers. The point is like very rare. So she had very severe autoimmune issues.
And very painful disease too.
Correct. And she had other ones as well. She was basically disabled. I was also more or less disabled for a while. So she came upon carnivore, was kind of getting bigger, and she chanced upon this carnivore diet. And now you have people who started eating a carnivore diet, and they especially people with autoimmune issues, they start feeling pretty good. And so I actually found out about this in 2013.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's the meat diet or the elimination of certain plants and vegetables?
It's the elimination.
Yeah, okay.
It's the elimination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
A little bit to do with the meat, but mostly to do with the elimination.
Yeah, okay.
Gotcha. So like meat is high in certain things that actually counteract some of the food sensitivities.
Okay.
So that's why people who have an autoimmune phenotype, they tend to do better on a paleo type diet because meat is richer in some of these things. And when I say it's richer in niacin, it's richer in tryptophan, it's richer in B12, it's some of the B vitamins, thiamine, and it's richer in it's got you can, if you're going to eat one food, it does have quite a lot of nutrients that could be quite good. But
in your case, what kind of meats were you eating? Was it just red meat? Was it fish? Was it turkey? Was it chicken?
So my all meat diet was basically meat and chicken. So they only eat meat. They don't eat chicken.
Just red meat.
And Jordan Peterson can't. He like I've seen him on some interviews explaining why he does this. He basically says like, I don't want to experiment. I am not experimenting. All I know is that this works for me. I'm not doing anything else. Huh. I had the opposite mindset of like, okay, this works for me. Now I'm going to try every other thing and see what the hell is going on. Right. I try meat and this, I try meat and that. I eat rice one. Like I literally just like, it was a little bit masochistic. But I basically said, like, I want to figure out what the hell is going on here, because nobody knows what the hell is happening.
Exactly.
And so it's been a long journey, but I've been able to figure it. Basically, like if they stray from the diet, they get a lot of issues. They eat, one random thing from the diet, they could get issues.
Wow.
I don't know about Jordan himself, but his daughter definitely. And Jordan just doesn't want to take any of those risks. He just knows, like, look, I was on a different diet. I had all these issues, depression, autoimmune, an eye disease, uveitis. I had this, that, and the other. All I know is that my brain is clear. I'm just not doing experiments. So that's his approach. Okay, you want to do that. So what I've been able to do is something that I did not think was possible. I've been actually able to cure fix all the food sensitivities I had. And this is from eating, like, literally, if I eat anything like a grain of rice, I would be like, whoa, getting brain fog.
Really?
And so now and this is something relatively recently where in the past 3 months, I've been just trying out a whole bunch of different things. And it turns out that either I don't react to it or the reaction is very muted, in which case I think I'm able to fix it. It's just I haven't been taking it long enough for my body to build tolerance yet.
So what I'm hearing is you've healed these food allergies, and that food you couldn't eat before
I've
you can now eat.
Correct. I've healed them.
Okay, how'd you do that? How'd you do that?
So there was new research that came out, and basically it was a combination of building on all the knowledge that I gathered, based on my DNA, my lab tests, and just the research that came out. And also my personal experiments. So all that kind of came together, and like I was learning one thing at a time. And so it was just kind of combining a lot of those things at a time. And by the way, these food sensitivities have a very similar mechanism to food allergies. It's just different people have a different immune system. So one person who would develop an intolerance, and they might eat it and then get some issue 3 days later. Somebody like me eats it, I get brain fog after an hour. Somebody might eat it and then have to go to the hospital and need an EpiPen, right? So that's kind of like how your immune system is built, but they're all essentially built in. I mean, the food sensitivity pathways are not too different in their core.
Gotcha.
But essentially, the food sensitivities have to do with primarily tryptophan pathway.
Okay.
And the tryptophan is actually related to the niacin pathway as well. So when you're deficient in niacin, your body
do me a favor.
And
explain pathway for us.
What is a pathway?
Yeah.
A pathway, basically, in the body, there's like a sequence of events. Whether it's a very broad term, but it could mean anything.
But when you say a niacin pathway, something like that, what are you referring to there?
Well, tryptophan pathway. So when you ingest tryptophan, it can how your body deals with tryptophan can go in like 20 different directions.
And tryptophan comes from turkey, if I remember correctly. Tryptophan.
Meat. Any meat.
Any meat has tryptophan.
Yeah. So let's back up a little.
Yeah.
Bit, right.
Yes.
Who gets food sensitivities? Okay. When do they come? And this is based on my experience, right? And people might have other experiences, but I've dealt with 1,500 clients. I'd had 1,500 clients in the past. I don't do a lot of coaching now, but I had quite a lot of clients in the past, and even people who just have food sensitivities. I always ask them because I have this way of thinking. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm at a cocktail party, like, oh, you got a food, what did occur after? I'm probing into these kinds of things. Right. So I built up kind of informal database based on my clients, based on just random service. So what do they come after? I found that two things: either a vegan diet, vegan vegetarian diet, or stress.
Oh,
that's it. Like I had a very stressful period, and then all of a sudden I got sensitive to all these foods, right? Or I had a trauma, or this, that, or I was doing a vegetarian diet. All of a sudden, like my health just crashed after a year, whatever, right? And it's like I started to get all these issues. I don't know what is going on, and you'll see a lot of these people who a lot of people have tried these vegan diets. Now, again, some people who do a vegan diet will be fine with them. Right, it also has to do with your genetic predisposition. Right. So those are the two big factors. Yep. So when and why are those the two big factors? Right? I always knew that, but I didn't understand why. The vegan diet is low in tryptophan and niacin. That's one. And especially if you're on like a whole food vegan diet, they the American government knows how important niacin is because people were developing blatant pellagra problems like serious problems from a B3 deficiency. So they just added it to everything in the food supply.
Right.
All the grains. Yeah.
Right.
Now, if you're eating healthy and, maybe, and then you're eating healthy and then you're also eating a vegan diet, you're having a low. So first of all, you're also stressing your gut with all these kinds of whole grains, right? Because there's kind of a balance between there's foods that are going to cause like a leaky gut, you can say, and then there's balancing factors that cause tolerance. So all of a sudden you eat a vegan diet, you kind of you put pressure on your gut
because of so much fiber. Would that be why?
No, it's the lectins.
Oh, the lectins. And lectins come from tomatoes. Where else?
No, they're in all plant-based
everything.
Everything.
And
every plant-based food. The only question is, how harmful are the lectins in each plant-based food?
And the lectins,
grains and beans are going to be worse.
The lectins are there to protect the plant from bacteria or organisms that will hurt
from
it.
us. No, from us eating them.
No kidding. Oh man, you're blowing my mind right now. You're blowing my mind.
From us and animals. They don't want us and animals to eat them, so they have these defense mechanisms so that we don't eat them.
So are you telling me right now broccoli's no good?
No. So that
okay.
So
all right.
Two things, right? Different plants have different.
Okay. Keep going with your story. I'm sorry to interrupt because I'm learning
1 second.
a lot
Different
here.
plants.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but different plants have different defense mechanisms.
Okay.
And with something like broccoli, number one is we cook it. You generally don't eat raw broccoli.
Right.
Number two is we've cultivated it for a really long time so that it's much more edible.
Gotcha.
That's two. So we've done our own survival of the fittest on the broccoli so that it can. It's like dogs evolved to like us, or is to be a certain way. They're really wolves, right? So like broccoli was a wolf at one point and it became a dog, right?
Gotcha.
And so but the thing is that certain things were just they were just much harder on the, like grains in general is going to be much harder on the system than broccoli.
Gotcha.
Okay, let's go back.
Get me back to that niacin and tryptophan, those pathways, and getting that into my body.
Right. So the vegan diets, okay, so they're low on niacin, tryptophan. Tryptophan can do a bunch of things in the body, okay? And there's three main pathways of tryptophan. One is when you're stressed, it's called this kynurenine pathway, where it takes tryptophan and it shunts it in this pathway that essentially helps you deal with the stress better on like something. You might feel like if you get really stressed sometimes, then there's kind of sometimes this equal and opposite response where you start to feel actually more relaxed at a certain time, because your body has this mechanism where it's like, okay, increase serotonin, increase this kynurenine pathway, and it makes you feel good, right?
Yep.
So that's like a mechanism where in certain ways it stimulates the immune system, and it's kind of like this pathway that's good for short-term effects, right? Less for long-term, but it helps us in the short term.
Okay.
So it basically, this kynurenine pathway ends up creating this kynurenine is an NMDA antagonist, which it's somewhat like ketamine. So if you ever take ketamine or magnesium, you'll feel more relaxed. It's similar to that actually. So it again, it's a different molecule, but same biochemical NMDA antagonism. So you have that kynurenine pathway, and then you have the serotonin pathway where you start producing serotonin. Now, the serotonin could be used for a lot of things. It could sometimes your gut can use it. Sometimes
isn't serotonin made in the gut as well?
It's made in the gut and the brain.
Yes,
so
right.
What is made in the gut doesn't actually impact the brain.
Okay.
And so there's like some myth busting, which is true, that the serotonin in your gut has nothing to do with the serotonin in your brain, which is true. The only caveat is that if you need a lot of serotonin in your gut, you're going to have less for tryptophan in your brain and vice versa.
Got it.
Okay. That's the thing that ties them together.
Got it.
Really. It's not the actual serotonin. Those are actually meaning your brain locally creates serotonin from the tryptophans. The tryptophan crosses the blood-brain barrier, helps create serotonin there. So, but those are the two main pathways. You have the serotonin pathway. You got, those two of the three. The third is where it starts to create a whole bunch of these different molecules. Your gut microbiota takes that, your microbiome, and starts to create all these molecules that cause basically you to be tolerant to foods, right? When so what happens is if you get very stressed, you use up all the tryptophan in the kynurenine pathway and then the serotonin pathway. Then there's no tryptophan left to create tolerance. All of a sudden, you start eating foods slowly but surely. You start becoming sensitive to those foods because your body is not learning how to be tolerant to them.
Got it.
That's now add a niacin deficiency to it. Your body very inefficiently, this is one of the pathways of tryptophan, is it can go in, because niacin is so important, it can go and create niacin. Now, 60 milligrams of tryptophan will create 1 milligram of niacin, and you need about 16 milligrams of niacin a day. So if you're not getting niacin, and the average human is going to eat about, let's say, 800 milligrams of tryptophan a day, all that tryptophan is going to go to niacin, right? Or a lot of it. So if you're deficient in niacin, you're stressed, and your tryptophan is going to be spreading out all over the place. It's not going to actually be creating those molecules that you need.
Got it.
So now if you add on a vegan diet to it, you're going to get about half the tryptophan that you would get on a much heavier meat-based diet. And all of a sudden,
you're sensitive.
It's a perfect storm.
Yep.
Oh yeah. You're just if you're stressed and on a vegan diet, one at a time, you're going to start building up those food sensitivities to everything.
And then you just feel
over
terrible.
A number of years, you're starting getting inflammation. What's going on?
Yeah.
My arms are hurting.
Right.
My brain fog. I'm getting autoimmune thyroiditis. What's happening here? Because you're sensitive to all those foods.
So what's your basic diet?
And also, if you add on like antibiotics to the mix,
that's worse.
You all of a sudden don't even have the microbiota to take that tryptophan.
Right. Now you're.
And then you add on some glyphosate. It actually interrupts that pathway with the gut microbiota to take the tryptophan. You're screwed in every way, right? And so that's why we're seeing an explosion of celiac, all different kinds of food sensitivities. Now, that's a simple version because there's a lot of nutrients are actually involved in creating tolerance in the gut. It's not just like tryptophan. It's actually a lot of things. So sometimes, for example, if you have a chronic infection and then the other thing that basically causes, and this is another way that people can get food sensitive, if they have a chronic infection or chronic pain or chronic inflammation, what happens is the same pathways get activated. Your body starts creating the kynurenine in order to counteract like that pain or inflammation, and then it's just sucking up all the tryptophan for that purpose rather than doing other stuff that needs to be done, including serotonin.
Yeah. So what kind of diet do you have now? And do you supplement it with niacin?
I do. I supplement with niacin. So just to be very clear, I don't recommend other people doing this because the more supplements you take, the more you have to know what the hell's going on.
Right.
But I do take 150 supplements a day.
You do?
Yes.
Well, I take like 20, and I thought I was nuts. 150.
No, so I take a lot. Yeah. I don't recommend people doing this because you really have to know. It's kind of like, do I recommend somebody becoming a race car driver if they've never driven a car before? No, right? Because they don't know how to handle it. They'll crash.
Right.
And in the same end, do I recommend anybody do any high level stuff? For me, it's a sport at this. It's just kind of like I'm just like learning new things. Like, how do I get every kind of maximization in? And like, I'm willing to take certain risks. I do a lot of testing. I do testing at least once a month now. So you have to, and I know what I'm doing. And even then, again, it's for me, it's a sport that has some risks. You got to be careful.
And how do you feel?
I don't recommend it. I think most people don't need more than 10 or anything like that.
So how do you measure this? By the way you feel? Is that your real barometer?
No. So there's a couple ways. One is the way I feel, right? If something's not feeling well, then that's but it's through lab testing.
Okay, like blood work.
I measure scans, like imaging, all different kinds of blood work scans.
What about genetic markers?
that's not for testing. So the genetics is going to tell you what you should do, what you should start with. The lab tests are then going to tell you how you're doing
So
and what you
so
need to
let's
change
talk a
from
little
that.
bit about your business SelfDecode. Is that where I would swab my cheeks and I would send you my DNA and you would send me a report, or how does it work?
Correct. So from a swab or a spit test, we can get all your DNA. And what we do is we look at 400 different genetic risks, and we say, okay, here's your genetic risk. We have a database of clinical trials for all the different kinds of natural recommendations, and then we say, okay, what is the best fit recommendation for what you have? And I guess a reasonable way, if I can share my screen, then I
Yes,
can
please.
show you how that would look.
Please.
I'm restricted, but in it you could unrestrict me.
Oh, so let's talk a little bit while you're getting ready to do that. Genetics and epigenetics. So my understanding is genetics, you inherit from mom and dad. And some of the markers are mutated, some aren't. And
Well, yeah.
talk about epigenetics. So genetics I got from mom and dad, but my understanding now with epigenetics, they're saying the environment will turn on or turn off genes and affect the cell.
That's true. So let me explain how you should think about genetics and epigenetics and lab tests.
Yep.
There's a lot of confusion here, and so I think it's a very important topic. But essentially, genetics is going to help you figure out what recommendations to start with, or what recommendations to do.
Yep.
The epigenetics piece, there's really not much at this stage you can get from epigenetics. And I just spoke to Ryan from True Diagnostic. We have a podcast coming out on that. That's epigenetics. What you can get so that is a useful test, and I've done it. And so the main benefit of that test right now is it tells you what your pace of aging is. And I think it's an advanced test in the sense of like, if you're taking 150 supplements, or you're doing like after you complete your regimen and optimize certain biomarkers, if you want to see like how is this impacting a whole bunch of metrics that I like, it's kind of just one test. It's saying, okay, what's your speed of aging? And that metric is looking at a bunch of different things. Now, it's not really telling you exactly what you need. It doesn't tell you what you need to do,
right.
But it just shows you did 100, you took 150 of these supplements. Let's see what your rate of aging is and compare it to other people.
Got it.
And there's only one company right now that I'm aware of that's really publishing and has good stuff. That's True Diagnostic. And so that's why I did that test. And my rate of aging is 0.72.
0.72.
That means for every
year, you're only aging 0.72.
Correct. And so what that tells me is that the benefit of that test is especially for somebody like me, I'm taking 150 supplements. Am I harming myself? Right? Like, so number one is I test a whole bunch of other lab markers, not just that, but this is like one way that you could say, okay, I'm doing overall pretty damn well, because that's actually a really good score. Very few people, that's extremely rare. He told me in the sense of like, especially in the general population, because they actually equalize it for people who are taking the test, and all the people taking the tests are longevity athletes,
right.
More or less, like they're people really into this stuff. And so mine was 0.72, which is quite low, meaning like it's quite a good score. And I think I'm actually going to improve it because I made some improvements to my regimen. But the point is that like, when it comes to epigenetics, that's the only real thing, that tangible thing that you might be able to get at this stage.
Okay.
And that company's doing it. The other companies, you really in the genetic space. I don't know. I guess I'm not going to be very politically correct right now, but
go ahead.
All the genetics companies that I looked at are more or less junk.
Interesting.
Because what we did was we actually spent $20 million to build our platform, and it was extremely difficult. It took a long time. If I want to do what any of these companies are doing, it could take me a week and $10,000. And so what happens is you have somebody that is good at marketing. They can build a genetics company. from one day to the other, and then here you go. We've got this genetics test. We're looking at these 10 SNPs, and we're going to tell you everything. It's voodoo. It's astrology.
Okay, because I have one of those in my hand. I'm not going to mention the name,
Yeah,
but I did
it's voodoo.
one. Okay,
It's
okay.
voodoo. It's voodoo. Because I know why. I'll tell you why. They're looking at not more than 100 SNPs, right? If you look at it, you'll see all the SNPs they're looking at. Invalid. When you need to, we had that in 2015.
When you say SNP, is that just a slice of DNA?
More or less. Yes.
Okay, and how many do you look at, your company?
100 million
versus 100.
Or some of them even do 5. Right? There was a new one that was getting very popular that literally only looks at 5 SNPs, and they don't lie about it. They tell you we look at 5 SNPs.
And then they give you a template kind of report for, blah blah blah, change a few things here and charge you $400.
Right. Yeah. Correct. Complete nonsense. It's astrology.
Oh.
It's astrology.
Wow.
I mean, what a lot of them are just, going based off the MTHFR SNP.
Right.
Which actually is legitimate, but there's also 99.9999 other million SNPs that have an impact. I'm not saying the MTHFR is important, and we include that in our software.
Right.
But it's not the only thing. It's just one marker, right? And I would say it's the equivalent to a lab test that you can take, and it has use, and we test for it and we give you the results. But you can't really, besides that one, you can't really know what the hell's going on from a couple SNPs.
Okay.
For anything else.
So let's stay with yours, because I really want to do yours now. So I go online, I go to your website, I buy a kit or whatever, sign up. You send me the swab, I assume.
Yep.
And then I send it back to you. And then you send me a report, which is going to basically tell me what.
It's not a report.
Okay.
We give you a platform. And I could show you what that platform looks like, but it's actually a very comprehensive platform, and you'll see it's the difference of like what we have versus like the report that you have is like like a house made of playing cards versus an actual house. I mean, there's no comparison. It's what you have is literally will take us like a couple days. Just gather some SNPs from PubMed, put them together, have some cheap software that we could do it in like, a couple days, and just give you a PDF and say, okay, based on this, you have these SNPs and do these recommendations. There's no real references for any of the recommendations. You don't really know like what the hell's going on. You can't verify anything. There's no published research on anything.
Right.
It's just the voodoo. It's like, it's the black box. It's like, okay, here's these SNPs. And there's a whole cottage industry based on like how to interpret this very narrow set of things that are meaningless.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm not, yeah. We had that in 2015.
Okay. So
I quickly realized that it was junk.
So you're going to give me a platform. What does that mean? And what am I going to do with it? And what's it look like?
Okay. So first we have to understand, why does somebody want to get a genetic test? So what can a genetic test provide, right?
Yeah.
One is ancestry. 23andMe is very good at that. We also provide ancestry, by the way, but we're not better than 23andMe in that. It's just we provide it because actually it improves our polygenic risk scoring. So that's another thing, by the way, that companies don't do is you actually need to adjust the results for ancestry, because what's relevant for you is not relevant for somebody who's Asian or black or Spanish.
Got it.
Yeah, they like even whatever voodoo that they're selling, even if that was accurate, it's actually not accurate for another ancestry. So number one is the voodoo is not correct, but if it was correct, it still wouldn't be correct. That's the short answer. But so we do ancestry, and that's one thing you can get. Another thing you get from your genetics is your genetic predispositions, which you kind of have to think about like in a higher level way how to look at that, because you're going to have genetic predispositions for things that you don't get, right? It's just you might have a higher risk for Alzheimer's, but guess what? You're doing a lot of healthy things that are reducing your risk for Alzheimer's, or you might have a high risk for, like, let's put it this, a lot of things that I had in the past, I had a high risk for, and actually I had them, but now I don't, right? So that's if in some sense that is what epigenetics is.
Changing
in
your
in another
lifestyle environment.
definition.
Yeah, that's the
Changing,
definition I was
that's
referring
the
to.
thing that
Environment,
okay, fine.
lifestyle, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's two different definitions for epigenetic,
Yeah.
or two ways people are thinking about it. One is like epigenetics, like what's your epigenetic age or rate of aging, and they're doing that through some methylation testing
Right.
with epigenetics.
And
That's one
telomeres
thing.
and stuff like that.
Yeah. Another is anything that you do every time you take a breath, your gene expression changes, right? Any right? If you're sitting down instead of walking or standing, your gene expression is going to change. Your genes are constantly creating proteins, right?
Based on what we're doing. Based on even what we're thinking.
On what we're doing.
Based on what we're feeling.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Exactly. So that in some sense is epigenetics. And in some sense also based on what your mom did in utero and what your grandmother did if she had like was starving or something, that certain things can, get passed down epigenetically. Okay. There's kind of different layers of epigenetics, but the epigenetics that you care about is I can change my gene expression based on what I'm doing or thinking or feeling, right? Mm-hmm. That's 100% true. So what a genetic predisposition is looking at is, well, it's taking a group of random people. These are people who are eating McDonald's, smoking, doing everything that the modern lifestyle does, and maybe some healthy people here or there. And it's saying, okay, people with these genes are, this more likely to get, you're in this percentile to get Alzheimer's, right? 96, let's say, okay, fine. But if you're also in the 99th percentile of being healthy and doing things that prevent that, then you're probably in like an absolute risk of much lower. And then the other factor, of course, is age. You're not getting Alzheimer's if you're 10 years old, no matter what. Right. So you have to be a little sophisticated when you think about genetic risk, which is a lot of people have a problem with. Like some people could look at, oh, I've got a higher risk of Alzheimer's, but wait, I'm 20 years old. I don't have Alzheimer's. So this is not true. Well, it's a little more complex than that, right?
Right.
Yeah, maybe they're being healthy as well. Okay, so that's the risk part. I genuinely believe that you can prevent pretty much any chronic disease. I don't know enough about. I think you can, with active prevention, I think you can probably prevent cancer as well. Now, I don't know enough about it to know with what degree of certainty or whatever, because a lot of that is we don't exactly understand why somebody gets cancer or not. And the genetic models are actually not very good for that because a lot of it's random. You were exposed to some chemical.
Well, yes.
Who knows?
And
right?
actually, I've come to believe I do a lot of work around cancer, and I've come to believe that 95% of cancers are environmental or emotional or thinking. It's not genetics. It's our lifestyle, it's our environment, and the toxicity of the world.
Right, which could be why the genetic models are not very good for it.
Right.
In addition to that, we also need more people, so it probably could get better. But right now, that's why we don't offer cancer.
Yep.
There's some regulatory concerns as well, but also it's not accurate enough that you're going to freak somebody out and it's going to be like, well, maybe you have slightly increased risk of cancer.
What about heart disease?
It's not relevant.
It's how do you look at that?
Actually. It's pretty good. So you could look at genetic risk for that.
You can.
And you could see, yeah, absolutely. And there's different kinds of heart disease. You could look at the different kinds of genetic risks there, but very preventable heart disease. Very preventable.
So when I look at my little report here in the MTHR, the MTHFR, right? And it says, okay, it's one parent was defective and one parent wasn't. What does that mean? Or the gene is mutated?
It just means it works a little less well, that specific gene, that biochemical pathway. But keep in mind, there's many biochemical pathways that could be interacting with that. Just as an example, MTHFR, I mean, that enzyme is related to a lot of different things that you're doing. So if you have higher levels of thyroid hormones, actually it increases that enzyme. Okay, interesting. If you get a little more methylfolate, it basically counteracts that completely. If you have one of those variants, not that meaningful, to be honest. If you have two, basically the recommendation is that's probably one of the few things that you could recommend something for. Take some methylfolate. or just make sure you're eating a lot of vegetables and make sure you're getting enough riboflavin. They've done studies where the only clinical trial on that was done is, and I have 2 of those variants, just to be clear, is that people who went on a diet that they had enough riboflavin that they met the RDA, their homocysteine went down from it. They basically just ate a healthier diet. Now, there's a lot of theoretical aspects that, you know, would make sense why you might want to just take a little more methylfolate, and that's that, right? And if you have one variant, it's not. I don't think you should probably do anything.
Okay.
But if you had 2, I would say take a little methylfolate and forget about it.
What is your education? What is your degree? What is your background? Because you're so intelligent about this. I know a lot of it was self-taught, but what is your education as well?
Well, so I didn't. So when I got to college, I guess I studied finance. I studied psychology. I studied. Yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but but I had all these problems. So I was always super just reading PubMed studies on my health, and then I decided, hey, like I had a health crash. I'm like, okay, I want to go into medicine. So I took some of the medical the pre-med courses. Nothing significant, but I've been really just researching.
So you're self-taught. You're
basically self-taught from all my companies are related to health. So it's like I had a SelfHacked and SelfDecode, and then I had a lab analyzer. We kind of combine those all together. But essentially, running these companies, I've always been involved in reading and doing experiments on myself. Like I've literally taken every supplement out there, probably like almost everyone out there. I know, tons of information on all these things. So it's really self-taught, and there's no real education on it because I have 2 brother-in-laws who are doctors. They don't know anything about this stuff.
Right.
And they ask me questions. They're like, hey, what does this mean? Even regular stuff. Like, what does this lab test mean?
Right.
Yeah. So
wait, we got to go deeper into this. So you were a guy that had some health problems, and you were concerned enough to eat sardines and blueberries in grade school, and you were kind of, I don't want to say the word obsessed because that's the wrong word, but you really wanted to understand this health process. And you're a very bright, intelligent guy, and you formed this amazing company that can really help people. You have 2 brothers that are doctors, and my understanding is they get like 3 hours of nutrition class in med school. I mean, how does that register with you?
It's not even. No, it's not even. It's worse. They don't learn. First of all the great research that has been coming out over the past 20 years, right? And that stuff basically barely made it into the medical school curriculum even 20 years ago, right? Like everything takes a lot of time. It's just like. And then what they're actually learning is like they're learning around, they know certain things that I don't know how to read an EKG machine, but that's not relevant for me, right? Unless you have a heart attack and you need an EKG machine and you need to understand what that means. If I need that, I will go to my brother-in-law who's a cardiologist. He'll tell me what that means, and he'll be able to tell me.
But Joe, what is more important than what we put into our body? What we eat and drink. I mean, that's what blows my mind.
They don't know anything about nutrition. They don't even know how to read the lab tests in any serious way.
Yeah.
And most doctors don't. They don't, because they're not taught that. They're really taught like, okay, if these things are really out of whack, then, well, a regular doctor will be like, regular internist a family care physician, they'll tell you where to go, which expert to go to.
Right.
But even these experts, they're just looking for a disease. Do you have a disease right now?
Right.
If not, go away. Right.
Right.
Like, don't bother me. Right. Well, my CRP is, I've got tons of inflammation. I've got this, but you don't have a disease. Get out of here. Right. What am I supposed to do?
Wow. Yeah.
So the actually, and it's actually quite clear if you want, like doctors are not actually healthier than the regular population. Right.
Maybe less healthier.
Yeah, maybe less, right? Like I haven't looked at that would be an interesting statistic that I should really look at. But the point is that they're not healthier, and you would assume that, well, if they know more, they should be healthier. Right. Like my guess would be that lawyers, just like high income professionals, would be just as healthy as doctors, right?
Right.
Like I've literally had a bunch of doctors. Oh yeah, I've got diabetes. I've got this. I'm like, what? Okay. And so the idea is they don't really understand how to prevent disease. They just know that if you have a disease, they know how to, the professional guidelines.
They know how to treat
look, somebody
symptoms.
gets a heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even symptoms. No, I don't even think so. If you have a disease and there's a drug for it, they can tell you, okay, you have this disease, right? The specialist will be able to diagnose the disease. And then here's the drug for it. That's it they can tell you.
Yeah.
They're not able to tell you what are all the biomarkers that are related to that disease? What are all the things that you can do to prevent it? What are all the things that you can treat it with, even that are not drugs? They don't know that. It's just out of their field of expertise. I don't really so I know some drugs that treat different things, but that's not my field of expertise because my field of expertise is preventing it. Or if I have it, how do I treat this without drugs? And you know what? If there's no other, if the natural stuff doesn't work, I will use a drug. End of story.
Right.
So I'll give you one good example of that. So on my quest to really optimize the crap out of everything that I do, I check a whole bunch of biomarkers. And by the way, so in Israel, and probably in the States as well, so LP little a, lipoprotein A, is actually getting more talked about now, but I've actually tested it in 2012 before anybody spoke about it, really. Because I was already reading about all these biomarkers in 2012. So you can kind of see that how long I've been pretty advanced.
But just so we're on the same page, because when you say LPA, I'm thinking LPA alpha acid. Is that what we're talking about?
No. Okay. Very different.
So
so lipoprotein A is it's a lipoprotein which is similar to the lipoproteins that you have with your cholesterol.
Okay.
Right. So it's a specific kind of lipoprotein that, just to keep it simple, that if you have it elevated, it causes heart disease.
Okay.
Right. Now, for all these things, there was some benefit. They still don't know exactly what it was. Maybe, for example, it helps with clotting. So if you got injured, if you're living in the Middle Ages and you're in an army and you got a sword attack or whatever, you might have healed a little better from this LPA, or it could be maybe certain infections, right? We don't know exactly, but the point is that about 10 to 20% of people have high levels of this thing. They don't check for it. They don't screen for it. Regular doctors, even cardiovascular. So once you get a heart attack, sometimes somebody's on the forefront, a cardiovascular expert, they will check for it. But cardiovascular disease builds from when you're 0 years old, right? And you start out with this lipoprotein A when you're young. And so just, why am I going to wait till I have a heart attack?
Right.
And so there's a lot of things, same with cancer, everything kind of builds over time. I'm not waiting till I have a heart attack at the age of 70.
Right.
I'm going to look at what my biomarkers are right now and optimize them right now.
Yep.
So one of the biomarkers was lipoprotein A. I had it checked and I had high levels. I'm one of those people that have high levels of lipoprotein A and dramatically increased risk for heart disease. So you have these people that just drop dead at the age of 60 from a heart attack. And it's what happened? Who knows? The guy died in his sleep. I wonder what happened there. Well, the guy had a whole bunch of things that he's just never checking, right?
Yep.
I had a friend who got a.
Let me interrupt you real quick because we're gonna run out of time. I'm gonna get off this call, and I'm gonna buy your kit, and I'm gonna send you my DNA, and you're gonna send me this platform. I want you to elaborate. Sell me a little bit more. What my benefits are going to be when I get that? Because we only got about 4 more minutes.
Okay, so let me explain. So what we're doing, we're actually doing a legit polygenic risk score, and we're giving you your risks. So you could see your risk for a whole bunch of different things. Each risk has its own report. You can look at the recommendations. So if you say, hey, actually, I don't know, I just got this, whatever, acne or knee pain or whatever, just type it in. It's going to give you a list of clinical trials that were done. Wow. And you cannot find that on ChatGPT. I always look, and it's it just hallucinates and gives you random stuff that doesn't have clinical trials, is not effective, whatever. It gives you a list of clinical trials. Okay. You can look at the report, what your percentile is, gives you a bunch of information. Now, the main way that it'll also tell you what labs to check for based on your genetic risks. So a lot of people don't know what they need to check for even.
Good point.
That's another thing.
Yep.
But the main feature I use right now is the recommendations, right? So it starts out with recommendations. You basically fill in some information. What do you care about? You can upload. Basically, the more information you give the system, the more accurate those recommendations are going to get. So you're going to basically be able to scroll through tons of recommendations, but they're prioritized based on what is going to have the most impact. And you can filter them based on supplements, based on diet, based on lifestyle, whatever you want to filter them based on a specific condition. But there's kind of a, if you don't filter based on anything, we filter it for you. Here's the things you need to start with. Okay. So you look at that, and then for each recommendation, you just click. I still can't share my screen.
I know. Sorry about that. We'll do it next time.
But for each recommendation, you just click on it, and it shows you, okay, here, this recommendation, there's clinical trials that help with these 2 lab tests that are suboptimal that you check for. We're also looking at suboptimal, not just that it's like, what the range says, because that's not very relevant a lot of times. This is helping for all these genetic predispositions that you have a high risk for, right? And then we're also integrating, like, for example, things like if it has a risk for something that meaning like if you take the supplement, you're actually higher risk for something, and you have a genetic risk for that, it'll downvote that supplement as well. And for example, if you say, hey, I do X, Y, and Z, or it'll basically make it more accurate as well. So the idea is you fill out. So
there's much input. The more input I can give it. The more you
input, you don't input anything. It'll still give you recommendations just based on your genetics.
Okay.
But I highly recommend. So you could start like that. You get the test. You just see, okay, here's my recommendations just based on the genetics, and it shows you this recommendation is good based on there's clinical trials for this based on all these genetic risks that you have, and you can look at it and be like, you know what? I had a problem with this in the past, and actually, and you could click on that and look at what are all the clinical trials, the references, all that stuff, all the content. But it just gives you, but that's if you want to go deeper. But it starts down by here is exactly what you need to do to optimize all your genetic weaknesses.
And when you say
tons of data.
Now will it give me nutrition advice? Will it give me supplement advice? It gives me all
supplements, lifestyle, diet, even specific foods, like, and it's all going to be based on clinical trials.
Okay.
And then also it's going to be based on, we upvote supplements if you have specific like specific variants that are attached to it. So we don't tell you if you have a specific variant that you should take something. We do it based on looking at all of your genetic predispositions and then finding a best fit with our database of clinical trials, of all the natural health recommendations that have clinical trials, which there are a lot, more than you would imagine, actually.
So it sounds to me, so we do these 2-week retreats where we bring people down here and we detox their body while we give them really good nutrition. We rewire their neural pathways, get their thinking right, get in the emotion, clean up any unresolved conflicted emotions in here. It sounds to me if they were to take this test prior to coming to us, we would have a lot more ammo to help them with their detox and their nutrition going forward.
Oh yeah, you better believe it. And if I were you, I think like so your retreat sounds like I'm going to be going there, right? And it's because it sounds amazing.
Yep.
I mean, some things that you're doing, like a lot of people have problems with these emotional issues that are causing a whole bunch of other issues, and you're going to be doing. So the genetics can tell you a good starting point for the recommendations. What I would recommend is also people get lab tests, and then they
we're doing we do blood work for sure. But I want to do some sort of genetic markers as well, something like your company. So give them that.
So it's going to tell you what to start with. What are you and exactly why? So you can see for every person, why is it telling me this recommendation? And if I want to look at the scientific clinical trials, I can look at that.
Yep.
And if you want to look at our algorithm, we're about to publish on that as well. So you can see everything is transparent with what we do.
All right.
There's no, like, you don't have to just like, oh, trust us. There's a black box here.
All right. Hey, listen, we got to run. It's selfdecode.com, right?
Correct.
If people want to learn more, go to selfdecode.com. I'm going to go buy the test today. I'm going to send this in. I'm excited to do it. We're going to make it part of our retreat. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're a wealth of information, hard to keep up with, but I really am grateful for you being here.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Have a great day. We'll see you guys next week. Until next week, go out there and manifest the life of your dreams. See you later. Thank you from the bottom of my heart in supporting me in bringing my message of hope, health, and abundance to as many people as possible. Will you please like, subscribe, and share this podcast episode? And I hope one day to meet you at Mountains of Hope, a place for deep healing and transformation.